A winter night draped itself over Dustmere Valley, like a burial shroud, the wind clawing across the frozen earth as if trying to erase every footprint of the living. Snowflakes drifted in slow, silent spirals, beautiful yet merciless. Each one a reminder that the land did not care whether a soul survived the night. Through that white emptiness, a lone woman staggered forward. Her breath trembled in the air. Her bare feet bled against the ice. In her arms, she carried a small Apache boy, no older than 5, his skin burning with fever despite the cold. Lips pale as moonlight, his breaths came shallow, more memory than life. She didn't know how long she had walked. She didn't know if she was still walking or simply falling slower than the rest of the world. All she knew was that if she stopped, her child would die. Far ahead, cutting through the void of night, a flicker of orange light blinked from a cabin window. Hope. Not warm, hope desperate. Final hope, the kind that forces the weak to keep moving even when there is nothing left to give. She reached the door. Her knuckles trembled as she knocked once. The wind answered with a howl. Twice. Her legs wavered. A final third knock, softer than a whisper. Then darkness consumed her strength, and she sank to her knees. Inside, Caleb Ross woke with a start. The fire in the hearth had burned low, casting long shadows across the cabin walls. He wasn't used to waking for anything. Nothing ever came this far into the valley. For years, his nights were silent, the world leaving him alone, as he demanded. But something tonight felt different. He opened the door, and froze. There, collapsed in the snow, was an exhausted Apache woman. Her long black hair hung in tangled strands, her skin ghostly pale, but her eyes, those deep, endless black eyes, were alive with something between agony and surrender. In her arms lay the child, limp and burning with fever. She tried to rise, but could not. Kneeling in the snow, she bowed her head. "I will trade my body," she whispered, voice cracking. "My child needs a father. Please, save him." Caleb's breath caught in his throat. He had heard those words before, not from her, from his own mind, years ago, while kneeling beside a bed in this very cabin, begging a God who never answered. That night, his little girl had burned with fever until the world went silent. That night, something inside him had died. And yet, in the boy's face, he saw her, not her features, not her skin, but her innocence, her helpless, fragile hold on life. Something within him, long, frozen, shifted. Without a word, Caleb stooped and lifted the boy with steady arms. Then he reached down and helped the woman to her feet. She sagged against him, light as sorrow. The cabin door closed behind them, not just to keep out the cold wind, but to lock away the past he had sworn never to face again. Inside, the firelight slowly pushed back the night. Caleb laid the child on the wooden bed, near the hearth, the same bed that still smelled faintly of lavender and memory. He pulled a thick blanket to the boy's chin and pressed his calloused hand to the small forehead. Burning, hot, to hot, the same heat he once felt beneath his palm, as his daughter's breathing faded into silence. His jaw clenched. His pulse pounded in his ears. He forced down the memory, like swallowing broken glass. Across the room, the woman sat in the corner on the floor, spine straight, despite her exhaustion, eyes locked on her son, as if blinking would let death steal him away. No words were exchanged. Only silence, a heavy, breathless silence. The silence of two worlds colliding in grief. Outside, the wind screamed like mourning spirits across the plains. Inside, time stood still. Caleb fetched water from the kettle over the fire, soaked a cloth, and pressed it to the boy's forehead. Each weak breath from the child dragged him deeper into the memory of his own helplessness. Not again. He stood, pacing, fighting the urge to run, to escape, to close every door and bury every feeling until the world disappeared. But he couldn't move far. The boy whimpered, and Caleb was pulled back to the bedside like a moth to flame. Across the room, the woman's fingers tightened into fists. Shame trembled in her eyes. She had offered her body like a transaction for survival. She hated herself for it, but pride meant nothing in the face of death. She had lost her husband. She had lost her tribe. She would not lose her son. She had walked through storms and gunfire, faced the hatred of every town, the rejection of every ranch. Nobody would help an Apache. Except this man. Why him? Because once, years ago, after a raid, she had seen him ride into their village not with a gun, but with bread. He had left food for starving children. He had said nothing. He had left before the soldiers noticed. He had a heart. A broken one, maybe, but a heart all the same. The boy coughed, small and pained. Caleb leaned forward, steady as stone. He took a deep breath and spoke for the first time since opening the door. "What's his name?" The woman hesitated, as if the wrong answer could cost everything. "Toma." Caleb nodded. "We'll keep him warm. Fever needs time." "We, not I, not you." "We." The word hung in the air, soft but powerful. Soon after, exhaustion finally dragged the woman down. She curled herself on the floor, too respectful to touch the bed, too scared to sleep, but sleep claimed her anyway. Caleb stood for a long moment, watching her. Snow melted from her hair onto the wooden boards. Her shoulders trembled with every breath. Even in sleep, pain clung to her like a second skin. Slowly, he reached for a blanket. Gently, he placed it over her sleeping form. It was the first act of kindness he'd given another soul in years. Hours passed. The wind outside roared and sobbed through the valley, rattling the windows like a grieving widow. The cabin walls groaned under its force, but inside, a fragile sanctuary remained. Caleb kept vigil. Each time the boy stirred, Caleb was there, replacing the cloth, whispering steady words, holding on. And each time the woman shifted, her hand reached out in sleep, as if searching for something she had lost. Just before dawn, the fever broke. The child's breathing deepened. His skin cooled. His small hand relaxed against the blanket. Naya awoke with a gasp. Her eyes went to her son first. Always first. Then she saw the man sitting beside him, slumped with exhaustion, head bowed, hand still resting protectively close. Tears welled in her eyes. Not loud sobs, silent tears of pure, trembling relief. Caleb opened his eyes. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Two strangers. Two survivors. Two broken hearts sitting in the quiet of a miracle. He stood, slow and stiff, and moved toward the door. The sun was rising, casting pale gold across the valley. Snow glittered like shattered glass. He paused, hand resting on the doorframe. "Why my cabin?" he asked quietly, without turning. Naya's voice was soft, but steady. "Because after the raid, you fed our children. You were the only white man who did not look at us like animals." Caleb froze, his breath hitched. He hadn't known anyone saw him that day. He had spent years trying to disappear. But somehow, kindness had followed him all the way here. He closed his eyes. Remembering the faces of children, he tried to savan the face of the child he could not. Behind him, the fire crackled gently. The boy slept peacefully. The woman watched quietly, protective and proud. Caleb opened his eyes and stared at the valley, stretching before him, vast, cold, empty, just like his life had been. Until tonight, he could send them away. He could retreat back into silence. He could honor the promise he made the night his daughter died. Never let anyone close again, but promises made in grief are cages. And the light from the cabin door spilled out behind him like the first warmth of spring. Maybe it was time to live again. He stepped back inside. The door remained open just a moment, then closed softly with his choice. He didn't say it out loud, but in his quiet heart, a new thought stirred. Maybe promises are meant to be broken when life asks you to love again. The days that followed melted gently into one another, like snow softening under the first touch of spring. The valley, once silent as a grave, now breathed with the sound of footsteps, soft laughter, and the crackle of a fire that burned a little brighter than before. Naya rose before sunrise each morning, helping with chores without being asked, mending fences, hauling water, grinding corn. She moved like someone who understood survival, every action quiet but purposeful. Caleb often found himself watching her, wondering how someone so worn by hardship could still carry such grace. Toma followed Caleb like a small shadow, curious and cautious. At first, he barely spoke, just watched with wide dark eyes. But one morning, as Caleb saddled a horse, he heard a small voice behind him. "Can I help?" 3 simple words. But to Caleb, they felt like the first green sprout through winter soil. He handed Toma a brush and showed him how to stroke the horse's coat gently. The boy smiled a faint, unsure smile, but it was more beautiful than any sunrise Caleb had seen in years. Inside the cabin, the walls no longer echoed with silence. Tools clinked, firewood stacked, cooking scents filled the air. The empty spaces in Caleb's life no longer felt so empty. But peace, in the West, is rarely left undisturbed. When their supplies ran low, Caleb faced a choice: ride to town alone, as always, or bring them with him. He hesitated. Naya stood at the door, shawl wrapped around her shoulders, eyes steady and unafraid. "If we hide," she said softly, "we already lost." He nodded once. They rode together. Dustmere town was small, but hungry for stories, especially ones soaked in scandal. When Caleb walked through the dusty street with an Apache woman beside him and a child holding his hand, the world seemed to stop. Heads turned. Conversations died midst. Windows opened. Doors cracked. Whispers bloomed like weeds. "That's Caleb Ross." "Is that an Apache?" "She's living with him. He finally lost his mind after his family died." Abigail Moore stood outside the general store, eyes sharp with venom masked as pity. "Some men can't live without sin," she murmured loudly enough for all to hear. Naya kept her head high. She had been stared at her whole life. But this was different. This was open judgment. Her spine stayed straight, but her hands closed around Toma's shoulders, shielding him. Caleb said nothing, but his jaw locked tight as iron. Inside the store, Miriam greeted them with a warm smiler, rare kindness. "You must be the woman Caleb saved," she said gently. "Your boy looks strong now." Toma hid behind Naya's skirt. Caleb felt something unfamiliar stir in his chest at the sight. Protective, proud, alive, as they left town with their supplies. Sheriff Warren Cole approached on horseback, stern, weathered. "Caleb," he said, glancing at Naja, "people are talking." Caleb remained still. I don't care what folks do on their own land. The sheriff continued, but the valley remembers the war. Keep your eyes open. Boone's been loud lately. Elias Boone, a rancher with greed in his eyes and bitterness in his blood. He had wanted Caleb's land for years. Now he saw a reason to take it. That night, back at the ranch, the air felt heavier. Naya sensed the shift before Caleb said a word. Do you want us to leave? She asked quietly. He turned to her, surprised. Do you want to? Her gaze softened. No, a simple word. But in her eyes, he saw something deep. Something that made his heart ache in the sweetest way. You and your son are safe here, he said. Her breath shook. Not from fear, from relief. Over the next weeks, the land thawed, snow receded, grass returned in gentle strokes of green, and real life began to bloom. Caleb taught Tuma to ride a pony. The boy fell twice, rose 3 times, and smiled wider each time. Naya cooked meals that tasted of home and memory. She sang soft lullabies in Apache under her breath while sweeping the floor. Sometimes, Caleb paused his work just to listen. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Naja sat on the porch, watching Toma chase fireflies. Caleb stepped outside and held a blanket. Without a word, he draped it over her shoulders. His hand lingered an extra moment. She looked up. Their eyes met. Not a single word was spoken, but something in the air shifted, gentle, fragile, undeniable. Days later, as dusk painted the sky in bruised colors, Caleb finally let down the walls he had guarded for years. He spoke of his wife, her laugh like light. He spoke of his daughter, the way she used to run barefoot through this valley. He spoke of the fever, the helplessness. The moment the world went silent, Naya listened, with tears in her eyes. Not of pity, but of understanding. My husband died in front of me, she whispered. Soldiers took our land. Our people scattered. I thought strength meant carrying pain alone, but it only made me hollow. Caleb looked at her. You're not hollow. Her gaze trembled. Neither are you. And for a moment, the night was warm, but the world does not forgive happiness easily. Elias Boone gathered a group of men, feeding them with poison disguised as justice. He's sleeping with a savage, letting her stay on good land. That ain't right. He's forgotten he's white. He's spitting on his wife's memory. By the time the moon rose full and bright, their anger had sharpened into a single plan. Make Caleb choose. His land or the woman. The attack came deep in the night. The barn erupted in flames, first fire licking the sky like a hungry serpent. Horses screamed. Wood cracked. Caleb burst out the door barefoot, eyes blazing. Riders circled the yard, torches in hand, guns glinting in the light. Elias Boone rode forward. Send the woman out. Caleb, this ain't her land. She don't belong here. Naya stood in the doorway, Toma clinging to her side. Caleb stepped in front of them. His voice was quiet, but it shook the earth. She stays, the boy stays. You want them? He lifted his gun. You go through me, Boone sneered. Then you'll die with them. Hooves scraped, guns cocked, flames roared. Then a whistle cut through the night. Silas, Caleb's old mentor, rode in from the darkness, rifle raised. You'll ride through me too. Another voice called out from the ridge. And me. Some men hesitated. Boone's grip tightened on his gun. The standoff stood like a held breath. Then Boone aimed a nod at Caleb, but at Naja time slowed. Naja's eyes went wide. She reached for Toma. Caleb moved without thinking. The gunshot cracked the sky. Pain exploded through Caleb's shoulder as the bullet tore through flesh. Naya screamed his name as he stumbled, but he did not fall. He turned back toward Boone, blood soaking his shirt, eyes fierce with something more powerful than rage. Something like love. Toma broke free of Naya's arms and ran to Caleb, tears streaming. Father. The word pierced the night. Everything stopped. The other men lowered their guns. Boone stared, speechless. The child clung to Caleb's leg, sobbing. Don't leave, Papa. Sheriff Cole arrived moments later with deputies. He took one look at the scene, fire, rifles, Caleb bleeding but standing in front of an Apache woman, and made his judgment. Elias Boone, he said coldly, you're under arrest. Boone fought, shouting curses, but the sheriff didn't flinch. You attacked a man on his own land. You threatened a woman and child. That ain't law. That ain't justice. Silence settled like heavy snow as Boone was dragged away. Miriam rode in, breathless, dismounting to kneel beside Caleb. She looked up at Naya and whispered, you saved him. Then, louder, to the watching men, she stood beside him. She fought for him. What right do any of you have to call her less than family? No one answered. Because in that moment, they all saw the truth. She wasn't the threat. She was the reason he was alive. Back inside, Naya stitched Caleb's wound with trembling hands. Tears fell silently onto his skin. You were a fool, she whispered, voice shaking. Why did you stand in front of me? Caleb winced, but his eyes were soft. Because I'd rather die protecting you than live without you. Her hands stopped. She looked at him like a woman seeing sunrise for the first time. I never needed a man, she said in a broken whisper. I only needed a home. He reached for her hand and placed it over his heart. And you are mine. Her breath caught. Then quietly, reverently, she rested her forehead against his. and closed her eyes. Not a kiss. Something deeper, a promise. Spring arrived gently, like forgiveness. The barn was rebuilt, stronger than before. The fields came alive in green and gold. Toma ran through the grass with laughter that made the mountains echo. Caleb taught him to ride a bigger horse now. Naya watched with a soft, permanent smile, fingertips brushing the place on her necklace where her past once weighed like a stone. Now it felt light. At dusk, they stood together on the porch, watching the sky bloom in colors that felt like peace. Toma fell asleep against Caleb's side. Naja leaned her head on his shoulder. They didn't speak, they didn't need to. The valley that once felt like a grave, now felt like a promise that even the deepest wounds can heal. When two broken hearts choose to rise together, life does not always save us with miracles. It often tests us with storms, with loss, with nights so cold we forget the shape of hope. But sometimes, salvation arrives not as a hero, but as a knock on the door. Sometimes the people we fear, the people the world rejects, become the very hands that lift us from our graves. Love is not loud, nor perfect. It is quiet strength. It is choosing to stay when running would be easier. It is two souls whispering, "You are safe with me." And perhaps the families we dream of are not found in blood, but in the courage to open our hearts again, even after winter.